Welcome to Stop the Takes. We are a football podcast focused on getting back to just talking ball. I'm Dakota, that is Austin, and today we are reacting to days 2 and 3 of the NFL draft. So rounds 2 and 3 yesterday and rounds 4 through 7 today. We are live on YouTube right now. How are we feeling, Austin?
Feeling pretty good, man. Fun. Days 2 through 3 of the NFL draft, especially day 2, man. A lot of super talented players going, like a lot of dudes that could have went in the first round going on day 2. So, yeah, man, it's just been overall a really fun draft to follow, and frankly, a lot of teams got better, man. Whole lot of teams got better. So,
And at the end of the day, that's all you can ask for. As fans of these teams, did you get better? And if the answer is no, then probably have a problem with your front office because it's
yeah.
literally the whole goal of this was to do that. So so let's dive into things, man. Let's talk about some of the themes. So what are the things that kind of we went over the first round. If you haven't watched that yet, recommend waiting till after you finish this to go do that. But go check out our first round review. But what stood out from days 2 and 3? Any themes, anything that stood out to you?
Well, kind of piggybacking on what I just said, man, teams are getting better at drafting just overall. There's not a lot of drafts this year, Dakota, or a lot of teams that I'm like, oh, this is just a terrible draft. Like, this is just like, man, they missed on every pick. Like, there's no guys I really like in the position that they picked them. Like, most teams I'm looking at, I'm like, dang, this is either a really solid draft or a phenomenal draft. There's really only a few teams where I'm like, well, you could have got this, you could have got that. So yeah, man, NFL front offices are just generally getting better at doing this overall, and that's kind of been a theme in the last few years of the draft.
I completely agree with that. And I think one of the things that nailed that was that graphic that popped up that Daniel Jeremiah's top 150 prospects, every single one of them got drafted.
Yep.
It's a good sign that their teams are taking the guys that are consensus the best at their position. So, I think one of the things that stood out to me, with how many offensive linemen and defensive linemen have been drafted. A lot of teams are wanting to build through the trenches, kind of following what the Eagles did, right? The Eagles loading up on the D line, loading up on the offensive line. You can never have too much depth there. So that's something that stood out. In a couple instances where teams traded up for them as well, like at the top of the second, the Dolphins traded up for the guard from Arizona, and then right after that, the Bills traded up for DJ Sanders, the defensive tackle out of South Carolina. So does not hurt to build through the trenches, and it seems like a lot of teams invested in that heavily this year.
Yeah, no doubt, man. That was definitely an emphasis. I mean, I don't know if you just mentioned, but 30 D tackles in the draft. That is a ton of defensive tackles in one NFL draft class, in my opinion. So yeah, that was definitely a huge emphasis. And the running back class, dude. I got to shout out the running back class, dude.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, not a ton on days 1 through 2, but in day 3, dude, they flew off the board. And honestly, a lot of teams got starting running backs, dude, on day 3. A lot of teams got starting running backs, or at least running backs that are going to contribute uh, to the team at some point. So yeah, really good running back class, and it showed throughout the draft.
Absolutely, yeah. And to your point, one of the things we talked about during our mock and everything is running back value, and when you take them, and there's been so many running backs that start in the NFL that have drafted on day 3. So I think 6 running backs roughly went on in the 4th round today. So they started flying off the board early. A few more fall in the 5th, and then a bunch in the 6th and 7th. So those running backs came off the board quick. And there was a lot of good guys that have the potential to get playing time that went in the 7th round, like a Damian Martinez out of Miami. One of the other things I think, before we dive into the bigger stories, is the corner class was an interesting one. And I think a lot of these guys were getting a lot of hype early on, but they just kind of slipped. I don't know if it's the NFL, like the value at corner position combined with just the way they evaluated this class. But a lot of guys we thought would go higher slipped to the 3rd round. Some guys went to the 4th. Like 3rd round, a ton of corners came off the board. So it may have just been a combination of the class versus the needs elsewhere and how deep, like the offensive and defensive lines were at the top.
Yeah, the corner class was really interesting, man. Like how just teams valued these corners as well. Like it was very clear certain teams were targeting specific spots in the secondary, and that's why you kind of get kind of just wonky results in this corner class. But a lot of talented guys at, like, I mean, like Siobhan Ravel. We'll talk about him at later in the podcast as well. But in the third round, that is insanely good value. You could argue a lot of these day 2 and 3 corners were, or at least the day 2 corners were first round grade worthy, right? Just some injury questions, and that's kind of what you see on day 2 and 3, right? That's another theme is like these guys that have first round talent fall for a reason, and it's like usually injury concerns or off the field concerns. But that's how you get some really good value, man, because taking chances on guys like that, and again on day 2, really good value. So
Definitely. Before we dive, we have a few things we're going to touch on specifically before we dive in. Appreciate everybody showing up in chat. We got some people watching live. Feel free to shoot questions, thoughts, anything you've got, put it in there. We can spend some time talking about anything you all want to chat on. But yeah, with that being said, the biggest story of the day, without a doubt, is the Cleveland Browns drafting Dillon Gabriel, 94th overall, and before Shedeur Sanders, and then 50 picks later, also grabbing Shedeur Sanders. What were your thoughts on that?
Man, a lot of thoughts on it. For one, I like taking a chance on a guy like Dillon Gabriel in the third round, dude. I really do. I think in the third round is when you go for a guy like that. And I think he has pretty decent arm strength, so he can play outdoors, which is going to be a factor in Cleveland. But, of course, the Shedeur fall was shocking, right? I mean, all the quarterbacks that went before Shedeur, no one expected Dillon Gabriel to go before Shedeur. And him falling all the way to the fourth round was, it was shocking, man, to say the least. But the Browns doubling up, dude, that just made the Shedeur fall even more surprising, because it's like, wow. And dude, we have to talk about like the reaction from the front office. That was interesting, dude. The front office did not seem very happy about picking Shedeur. That's all I'm going to say. And I said fourth round. He fell all the way to the fifth, man. It's just unbelievable. 6 QB taken, or 6 QB taken in the class. Dude, he was a consensus top 20 pick. And listen, it's pretty obvious that a lot of it had to do with non-football related reasons. Or I wouldn't even say non-football related reasons, like leadership concerns, right? Teams don't love when you're throwing your offensive line under the bus. And I think that's kind of went into this Shedeur fall. But man, from the Browns perspective, dude, just purely from the Browns perspective, I absolutely love it. You're taking 2 chances at the most important position, and you got a guy that was, some people thought you could take with the number 2 overall draft pick, dude. The number 2 overall draft pick, and you got him in the 5th round. And on top of the trade, what you did with the second overall pick, turned that into Mason Graham, a first round pick. Just from the Browns perspective, dude, doubling up at the most important position. And now you kind of have, who's going to win the QB battle between the rookies? Who's going to emerge as the best rookie on this team? It's going to be interesting to watch, dude.
Absolutely, yeah. When Gabriel going before him in general was a shock to see him come off the board that early. He's been an interesting prospect that a lot of the guys we follow, with the Check the Mike guys, they were a bit higher on him than I think the consensus. But for context, the consensus had him at 178, and he went 94th overall. And we'll touch on that more later, but these QBs in general kind of went lower than what people thought. He's one of the only ones that actually went higher. But Shedeur finished at 12 on the consensus board. And obviously that's from an outside perspective looking in, because at the end of the day, you may not love him as a prospect, but to be honest, the football aspect is not what led us here. Right? That is not what got us here. So he has the talent. But I completely agree from your, the Browns taking a shot on 2 QBs like this, a guy that people would have, if they had taken him second overall, would have been may not love it, but makes sense. You've got to take a shot on the QB. You got to get out of the Deshaun Watson situation. And instead they get him in the 6th round, or the 5th round. Yeah. At the top of the 5th. And now you have an interesting QB room. It's going to be fascinating to see. Yeah, somebody's on the way out. So for context, they have Deshaun Watson still under contract, but he will be out this season with an injury. They traded for Kenny Pickett, and then they also signed Joe Flacco. Now they've drafted these two guys, so looks like Flacco's probably on the way out. He'll be the unless they cut one of these rookies, but it'd be fascinating to see. And I think one of the biggest conversations will be how Shador handles this. Going from being what people thought was going to be kind of a minimum of first round pick to being drafted in the fifth round, and not even just being drafted there, but being drafted after somebody else to that team. Where all things considered, you're kind of going in as QB5 on the depth chart right now. So it will be a fascinating training camp and off season workout for the Browns.
It really will, dude. I mean, they are a great contender for Hard Knocks. We talked about that earlier, but I almost wonder if they'll lean Joe Flacco in this competition, which I know sounds insane. If Joe Flacco wins this job, that would be absolutely hilarious. But having that veteran presence, right? Somebody who's done it before and Shadur and Dylan Gabriel can learn behind, that might be pretty valuable. And let's just be honest for our listeners, dude. The little listeners we have right now, we're trying to be honest on this show. That's our goal. Kenny Pickett's not winning you games, dude. That's just not happening. Not in that division with Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson. That is just not that. He's not a competitive quarterback. He's a good backup option. He's a great backup option.
Right.
One of the better backups in the league, I would say. But he's just not a viable starting option. So for me, you should focus more on the development of your rookies. And I'm not sure like Kenny Pickett really helps the development of those rookies in that room, because for them to get out of this Deshaun Watson situation completely, which they are doing a phenomenal job of doing, by the way. I mean, this might be the worst like move ever made by a team. Like seriously, like between the draft capital they gave up and the contract for Deshaun, it might be literally the worst move in NFL history. And I don't think that's an exaggeration, but they are doing such a good job right now of trying to get out of this by the trade back. And now you take two chances at QBs. But the way you fully get out of it is one of these rookie QBs hitting the high end of their potential and becoming a viable starting NFL QB. And potentially, this is like a very low percentage chance of this happening, but an elite QB. But keep in mind, like Shadur's might be the sixth QB off the board, but look at any mock draft, any consensus board. This was the second ranked QB in this draft class, and they got him in the fifth round. There's absolutely zero risk in this, dude. That's one like thing that I'm taking from it. It's like, okay, yeah, you have the question marks of him as a player, but you can cut him in the offseason. It doesn't matter. It's a fifth round pick. Teams cut fifth round picks all the time, so it wouldn't be that shocking. But the upside of it is you get the second best QB in the class, or potentially the first best QB in the class, and you get your franchise quarterback. That's the upside of this. So, I mean, no risk to a lot of upside. I mean, there's not a lot of better moves you can make.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point. Like, if you draft him in the first round, the optics there are going to be tough. If things go south, you're kind of in it for the long haul for the most part, right? Like you kind of have to ride out whatever happens with the off-field antics or whatever that becomes. But drafting him in the fifth round means like in that, like we'll see. Like I don't want to say humble him because we don't know the whole details of everything, but like you put him in an interesting situation now where you do kind of have a short leash for him, right? Like he now controls how much he's going to contribute to your team, and you now have the full power on whether or not he's a part of that. So if he, comes in and dedicates his time to getting better and focusing on football, and he could end up becoming your franchise quarterback, that's fantastic. If not, you can, to your point, you can just cut him. You can move on really easily now without having to worry about anything else. And you basically just wasted a first round pick or even a second. Well, that would have been a tough thing to sell. So you basically have an easy out now. And then to your point, you have an incredible amount of high upside there. I think the only thing that'll be interesting, and his arm's not that bad, but like we talked on it a little bit that him going to a dome like the Saints probably would have been really good, but I don't think it's going to be a bit of an issue. But that will be one thing to watch with him in Cleveland. But yeah,
dude, I think out of all the teams, and we'll get into our favorite drafts later, and this might be a hint towards that, but out of all the teams outside of the Titans, which had the first overall pick, so they did the no-brainer move and take Cam Ward. The Browns did the best at navigating their bad QB situation, in my opinion, dude. Like out of like what I saw from all the other teams, and I don't hate those other moves. I'm just saying doubling up at two QBs in the third and fifth round, which again, there's not a lot of investment there, and you get the consensus second overall QB in the draft. Like, I mean, there's no better way they could have handled a bad QB class, because that's what every team was handling in this draft class, is that this was a poor quarterback class overall. It just wasn't one of the better classes. So, like in a tough situation to find a franchise quarterback, I think the Browns did the best they could. And who knows, it could not work out. I'm not saying it's like a slam dunk. One of these guys will end up becoming good, but it's better to have two chances at a guy coming good than just one. So
Exactly. You have to take shots at the most important position. And in the state of their roster with the Deshaun Watson situation, having two guys like that to come in and potentially do it. And again, chances are they probably don't work out as top quarterbacks, but you have to take those chances. So definitely cannot fault them for that. And some people might say, oh, why would you do that? But like, it's also just insurance. I mean, one of the best examples of that working out so well was Washington in 2012.
yes,
Right? They
yes,
take RG3 second overall and then take Kirk Cousins in, I think, the fourth round that year.
fourth round, yeah,
And then RG3 has the injury stuff that you really didn't see coming. That didn't really happen while he was at Baylor. And then Kirk takes over and ends up becoming a solid starter for them and goes on to get a big contract elsewhere. So those are the types of things you can never plan for, but having that insurance and that type of thing is also super helpful. So
or even more recently with the Falcons. I mean, it's a little bit different
true.
situation because you didn't take two
Right.
rookies, but you signed Kirk Cousins as this massive offseason deal. And it honestly, from the outside looking in, it's like, okay, now the Falcons are going to compete for the division. They have their franchise QB. But then you go draft Michael Penix top 10 overall, and people thought it was ridiculous. How are you going to draft a
Yeah.
quarterback when you just signed one to a massive contract? And then look what happened. Kirk Cousins can no longer really play at the level that he used to play at. And Michael Penix ended up being as of now, he's a good pick. And now they have their franchise guy for the future. So yeah, man, there's never there's never enough shots at quarterback, man. When you don't have a guy that's elite, to me, you have to keep taking shots at it until you get a guy like that. So
Absolutely. So speaking of taking shots on quarterbacks, let's talk about the other guys that went on days 2 and 3. So rounds 2 through 7, a total of 11 quarterbacks went on between the second and third days. So excluding just Cam Ward and Jackson Dart, who went in the first round. So let's start with what was at the time the most interesting pick, which was Tyler Shuck. Goes 40th overall, absolutely polarizing prospect.
yes,
But he goes 40th
yes.
overall and really set the tone for Shedur's fall. What was your immediate thoughts to that?
Like you said, very polarizing prospect, and I would lean towards more of the negative side of his evaluation. I didn't do full evaluations on each prospect. Hopefully, at some point with this channel, we can do that and give our honest reactions to these players. But listen, Tyler Shuck has some ugly plays on tape, man. Like out of this class, like even Cam Ward has some ugly plays, but Tyler Shuck's plays are just like out of this world ugly, man. So I mean, listen, they clearly liked the guy. And again, I'm not going to be a hypocrite. You got to take chances at QB, but in my opinion, there was probably higher upside QBs on the board than a guy like Tyler Shuck. And with the 40th overall pick, man, and again, we talked about this on our last episode in, I believe, the round 1 recap or the mock draft, whatever it was. The Saints don't have a starter right now, man. Derek Carr is
Yep.
out for the 2025 season. And the only other guy on the roster that could potentially start is Spencer Rattler. So they're drafting Tyler Shuck at number 40 overall to compete for the starting job next year. Like that's the expectation. Unless something changes with Derek Carr's injury, like he's gonna have a real chance to compete for this job. Which, dude, if you told me out of the QBs drafted this year that Cam Ward and Tyler Shuck would be the 2 day 1 starters, I would laugh in your face, to be completely honest with you, man. Like Tyler Shuck wasn't even really on my radar during the college season as a potential quarterback to be taken. But again, you have to take a chance on the position. The Saints right now have Carr, who is hurt, but even Carr is not their future. Like Derek Carr is not the future of the Saints. They still need a franchise quarterback. So I don't hate taking the chance on the quarterback. personally, I probably would have gone with a different one.
Yeah, I completely agree. And for context, he's 70th on the consensus board. Jalen Milroe is ranked ahead of him for the athleticism wise. That's what stands out. And that's the thing with the Shuck, that like it's an interesting pick where he doesn't necessarily have anything that stands out from like an arm talent perspective, athleticism. He's also older. He's been in college for a while, so he's like 25 years old. I think when the season starts, roughly is what he'll be. So you're also drafting a guy to kind of be your guy who's not going to have as much time. That was surprising. And to your point, he will be essentially. I mean, I'm sure they're going to say somebody, Spencer Rattler or whatever they do in free agency before training camp will be our starter. But more than likely, I would be shocked if this guy's not starting by week 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of pressure now too as a second round pick. But a lot of smoke started to come out, and I think Schefter tweet, maybe Daniel Jeremiah or Ian Rappaport, one of them was talking about how the Saints seem to like him a lot, and they proved that by grabbing him there, and that was what then triggered the Shedeur fall, and then everything after that was essentially people just kind of waiting. Okay, when is he going to go? So the next QB off the board then was Jalen Milroe. So he was the consensus QB 4 behind Ward, Sanders, and Dart. Goes to the Seahawks in the 3rd round, which I talked about this a little bit with you, where it's like I think I'd seen so many mock drafts earlier in the season when the Seahawks had a losing record that were projecting Milroe to try to be like a top 15 pick that put him there. So I think it is an interesting fit for him, but and decent value, I think, for that.
Yeah. Listen, I actually liked this pick quite a bit. Because he doesn't have pressure to go start. That's really the difference between him and Tyler Shuck right now. I mean, Sam Darnold's their guy for the foreseeable future. I mean, they signed him to a 3-year deal. So I mean, there is absolutely no pressure for Jalen Milroe to start. So guess what? He gets to be kind of like a Jalen Hurts when he was drafted. A little bit different players. Did play at the same schools at some point, but they can develop as passers. Like that's Milroe's thing. Like Milroe is a special athlete with special arm talent, but he's just not an accurate passer of the football right now. He makes poor decisions. But if you have 2 or 3 years to develop under a guy like Sam Darnold, who, he's kind of a question mark going into next season, but he just came off his career year. I think that would be really good for Milroe, man. I think, in the 3rd round, this is the kind of pick I love in the 3rd round, because it's like, listen, 3rd round picks at, say you make a 3rd round pick at a running back. I mean, those don't work out all the time, or linebacker. Those don't work out all the time. But when you take it at a quarterback, when it does work out, okay, a 3rd round running back, when he works out, it's like, yeah, that's solid. We're a linebacker, you get a starter in the 3rd round. But if you hit on a quarterback in the 3rd round, dude, the amount of value you get from that is just unbelievable, man. I mean, that's just, again, it's the most valuable position. So really in the 3rd round, dude, you can take whoever. I'm like, okay, listen, I get it. You're taking a chance on a guy. And I think Milroe has the tools. I mean, he has the tools. And so again, that's why I think it's the perfect situation for him, because a guy with the tools, but just hasn't put it together yet. That's a perfect opportunity for that guy to sit behind a good NFL starter for 2 or 3 years and develop and potentially become the future franchise quarterback.
Absolutely. And, funnily enough, Seahawks have a track record of drafting guys in the 3rd round and it working out. A little bit different, obviously, but that was where they drafted Russell Wilson at in 2012. And that, kind of, honestly, very similar. It's kind of crazy how alike that is to what happened then. A bit different because Matt Flynn was who they had signed at that point, who was coming off of basically one good game where he threw like 6 touchdowns for the Packers. But they sign him to a contract and then turn around, draft Russell Wilson in the 3rd round. So it is kind of interesting how similar this situation is to that. And I agree. I mean, taking a shot on a guy that has the athleticism in today's NFL is always worth it. And hoping, you can develop him as a passer, and having some time to sit behind Darnold and just sit and learn in general will benefit him a ton. But yeah, I think it was a good pick, and we'll see how he looks in preseason and whatnot. The next 2 guys off the board were Gabriel and Sanders. We'll skip them after touching on them, and then we can touch on a few of these guys at a high level. But the QBs in general just kind of went lower than what the consensus had. So Kyle McCord was then the next guy off the board after Shedeur, who was a 132 on the consensus. Um, goes to the Eagles to be a backup. A lot of these guys are getting drafted into situations to immediately be a backup. Except for the one after him, Will Howard.
Yeah.
Steelers passed on a QB over and over and over again and then take Will Howard in the 6th round.
I think Will Howard is probably the most interesting because he has the clearest path to the field. Just to touch on Kyle McCord before I get into Will Howard, though, that's a great situation to be in, man. I mean, it's a loaded roster. Oh, yeah. You get to sit behind Jalen Hurts and develop. And dude, you never know. These guys, if they develop for a few years, they could potentially get their chance somewhere else. So I think I just love that situation for him. But Will Howard has an opportunity to play this year. I mean, it really depends on what Aaron Rodgers does. Like, yeah. Will Howard could be this starter day one, man. I mean, that's just crazy to say. But right now they have Mason Rudolph, and he's just, again, kind of like Kenny Pickett. It's just that's not a viable starting quarterback. And the Steelers are not a team that team's looking to win every year, man. Like every team is in a sense, but you can kind of tell when a team's not as worried about being competitive, let's just say. But the Steelers want to make the playoffs every single year, and that's kind of Mike Tomlin's thing. So, I mean, Will Howard could potentially be the guy. If Aaron Rodgers doesn't sign, I just see them targeting someone else, like a more experienced guy, like a Kirk Cousins or Will Levis has been mentioned for them. But yeah, I mean, Will Howard's interesting because if everything falls apart for the Steelers, Rodgers doesn't sign, they can't pick up another veteran, then Will Howard could literally be the starting quarterback for this team, which I'll be honest, man, I don't like that as a starting option. I think this is the kind of guy that needs time to develop. But at the end of the day, though, they could be looking at, hey, national championship winning quarterback, and he started to get better at the end of the year, man. Like, come the playoffs, he had an unbelievable run in the playoffs where he was part of the reason Ohio State went on that run. Yeah, they have all the great receivers and whatnot, but he played his best ball when it mattered most. So I like that intangible of him, but as far as like a starter right away, I wouldn't like that. I'd like him to sit behind a guy and develop.
Absolutely, yeah. And McCord, going to the Eagles, getting to sit behind Hurts, you're probably playing week 17 and 18 a little bit once they've locked up their playoff spot and you go out there and play. It's a nice gig to have. The Will Howard one is interesting. I mean, to me, it says, and I think it may have been Ian Rappaport, somebody said that, like, the Steelers feel pretty good about Rodgers. Like, he just hasn't done it yet. But, I mean, he's not on your roster. Like, that is what we know for sure. So, as of right now, your QB1, I guess, is Mason Rudolph, and now Will Howard is the other guy. So, I do like to pick, the value there in the 6th round. And he did play his best in the playoff. I mean, his PFF grade was fantastic in that playoff run. Absolutely tore apart our Vols. We watched that in person. He was on fire in that game. Yeah. So he looked great. So, yeah, we fascinated to watch what happens. And then, I mean, he'll have an opportunity. I mean, depending on what Rodgers even does, I mean, there's a chance that he's their guy next year because if Rodgers only plays for like another year, we don't know what he's going to do in general. So, we know the Steelers aren't going to be drafting above top 18 because they're going to have a winning record. It's what they do. So that'd be interesting to see. Some of the other guys came off were, your Colts drafted Riley Leonard next in the 6th round. A lot went in the 6th. So Riley Leonard, Graham Mertz from Florida then goes. We have a little bias there, but he was 340th on the consensus board.
Bit of a reach.
Comes off in the 6th round, yeah. And then 2 other guys, so Cam Miller from North Dakota State comes off the board to the Raiders, and they also draft Tommy Mellon, a quarterback who will be playing wide receiver for the Raiders. We got to give him a shout from Montana State. They had done their homework.
4.39.
Yeah, so that guy will be slotted in at receiver for them. So if you count him, then you have like 6 QBs come off the board in the 6th round there.
Yeah, a lot of QBs went off the board. Listen, it's none of these guys are going to play, but like I like Riley Leonard in the system with the Colts. Like that kind of QB, the running style kind of reminds me a lot of AR, just a raw passer, but is a good power runner. And so again, he fits the system. But he probably won't get a chance to play anytime soon. More of a developmental guy. Don't know much about Cam Miller, though. I'm kind of interested. He put up good numbers with North Dakota State, and North Dakota State also has a history of putting out good NFL talent, especially at the QB position. So I actually did watch him against Colorado and was pretty impressed though. I remember I was pretty impressed in that game with Cam Miller, but and then the Curtis Wark and Quinn Ewers in the 7th. Quinn Ewers, interesting, man. A lot of QBs went before I thought Quinn would, to be completely honest. It was looking like for a while he might go undrafted. I like that as a pick for the Dolphins. That's one of the best, I would say, picks in the late rounds at QB, just because I think Quinn, I mean, 5-star coming out of high school, like he has a lot of upside, I would say. And you know, come like middle of last college football season, people thought he was going to be a first round pick, man. Like he was one of the highest rated quarterbacks in this class at some points last year. So I like that pick a little bit. But again, he's a backup option. Like all these guys are backup options, obviously. But with Tua's injury history, he could find himself on the field at some point next season. So that will be interesting to watch.
And again, it's all projection of what we don't know what these guys will become, but the quarterbacks being drafted at this point, we do know that you're slotted in to be a backup. That's what they see you as. Quinn Ewers is fascinating though. The story for him and him coming out as a 5-star. I don't remember if he was exact. He may have been QB1 in that class.
I believe he was.
And goes to Ohio State and then transfers to Texas, and he was still 123rd on the consensus board and goes in the 7th round there. At pick, let's see here. Pick 231.
Yeah.
So he goes basically 110 roughly picks after what his consensus was. So it's interesting. I'm surprised that he fell that far. I mean, even just going into this season and even at the beginning of the season, mock drafts had him consistent in the first, or like at the worst, he's like, oh, he's a 2nd-round quarterback. What I do wonder now, I love the pick from the Dolphins' perspective because, to your point, like to his health, you got to have a solid backup, and having a young guy that could potentially develop, because we don't know if Tua does have another injury, how long he can keep playing. So having a young guy that may be able to develop. So yeah, and then it makes you wonder how much regret there may be about him not coming back. Because obviously I don't know if he was going to be able to play at Texas. I think they were ready to move on to Arch, but he could have transferred and played another season, and I do wonder how much him and his camp may kind of wish they had done that in hindsight. So looks like we have some stuff in the chat here. I don't know why I fell so far, no big story, but I need not take it on why he fell. Yeah, so I'm going to be honest with you. It has nothing to do with his talent. That is the truth. I don't think, I mean, the evaluation on him probably ranges for some people. I think the lowest I've ever heard him is probably like in the 40s. But that means you are worth a 2nd-round pick at that point. So talent-wise, he definitely has the skill set to be a quarterback worth taking a shot on in the late 1st round, early 2nd. I think it's just everything else that came with him. And one of the reports that came out, he himself has since said that he could have handled the pre-draft process differently. And I think that says a lot about two things. One, a lot of the noise we heard, we avoid too much noise here with the hot takes, but a lot of the noise, at least we heard around how those interviews went with teams, were probably true. He's essentially admitting that. And it's also a good sign to say, he's opening and being honest about that now, looking at it in hindsight, but you can't undo it. So now you got to live with those decisions that you made, but
exactly. And it kind of speaks to what you were talking about earlier, Dakota, that this process could humble him. And if it humbles him, dude, I think if you can take kind of like the negative part of Shedeur out, which is leadership questions and being more humble, because that's what it takes to be a franchise QB, man. A franchise QB is a humble guy who gives credit to teammates and doesn't tear them down. If you can take that out of Shedeur, then all of a sudden, dude, like I mean, in the 5th round, I mean, you could actually have a franchise quarterback out of the 5th round, which would be phenomenal value. But yeah, to your other point about why he fell, listen, like he reportedly didn't talk to any team drafting outside of the top 6. I mean, he wouldn't even meet with them. And when you don't meet with the majority of teams in the NFL, it's going to rub them the wrong way, man. It's going to rub them the wrong way, especially when, like, in all fairness, dude, yes, he was 1st-round worthy as far as talent's concerned, but there's no question that they're like top 6. I don't think a lot of people had that kind of evaluation of him. Like, I really don't. He wasn't that talented of a quarterback. He doesn't have like a big
Yeah.
arm or anything like that. So, yeah, I mean, if you don't talk to teams, dude, that's going to rub a lot of them the wrong way. And I think that's what happened, dude. I mean, I think he upset a lot of teams in the process, and him already admitting that is a good thing for me. I mean, he already came out and admitted that. And if he continues to kind of go down that path of humbling himself, then I'm actually really excited about what he can possibly become in the next level.
Yeah, and to my point, or like, I think that's part of why teams let him fall is that he doesn't necessarily have any elite traits as a quarterback. I think if you take what Cam Ward is and added this stuff to it, we're probably looking at a different situation here. Like he probably does go higher, and it's not that he's not a good quarterback. It's just he has very good tape and he has the statistics. He has everything to back it up. It's just that he's not necessarily a great athlete. He doesn't really have like a strong arm like a Josh Allen, where like you're basically banking on creating accuracy and stuff. Like he does have pretty decent anticipation and whatnot, but it's just doesn't have anything that's elite. And that combined with because of that, you are more willing to let that fall down the board
Exactly.
and not deal with the other aspects. So I think all things considered, the people have talked about this on and off and constantly, but I'm fascinated to watch his career. And honestly, I kind of want to see how he handles this all and see what happens. So, yeah, appreciate the stuff in chat. Feel free to shoot in any questions, anything you want us to chat on as we continue. We will definitely touch on it. So, any last thoughts on the QBs before we move on?
No, man. Interesting class. I'm interested to see kind of if any of these guys from the later rounds can potentially get a shot in the NFL. I mean, those are always fun stories. So,
perfect. So now let's segue into something else. Let's talk steals. So a handful of guys every single year. They're the guys that fall. They're the guys that on the consensus big board that make it way past where people thought they would go for various reasons. I know off the field stuff has a lot of impact on that. Shador is a very good example of that. Just talked about him. He did just fall really far. What are some of the major, steals that stood out to you, the guys that kind of fell in the draft?
first one that stands out in the second round is Luther Burden to the Bears, man. I thought Luther Burden was potentially outside of Travis Hunter. I'm saying T-Mac and then Luther Burden if I'm ranking the receivers. You could argue Luther Burden, if you look at just his 2023 tape, was better than T-Mac. So we're talking about one of the most talented wide receivers at the most important or one of the most important positions on the field. In the second round, dude, you add him to that offense, which is already loaded, and he fits right into the skill sets of the other receivers on that team. So that's the first guy that stands out to me as a steal. I think he's a first round talent that fell to the second round and is going to one of the better situations that he could honestly fit in right now. So I absolutely love that pick.
Yeah, I love him too. You and I were both high on him. I think we both agreed he's wide receiver too. And honestly, the gap between him and T-Mac, I don't think for me personally was as big as a lot of other people. I think his skill set with once you get the ball in his hands, is by far the best in this class. The broken tackle rate was like that of almost like a running back. I mean, he's special when he gets the ball in his hands. And I think there was a little off the field stuff. I know they touched on his attitude after Brady Cook got hurt and the team kind of fell apart, but that is what it is. I mean, if anything, that tells you the guy wanted to win and they weren't winning. So,
yeah,
one of the ones that stood out to me are the corners. We talked on it earlier that the corners in general kind of didn't go as high as a lot of us thought. Will Johnson, I know you and I both love Will Johnson, 13th on the consensus board, had a knee thing where the longevity is at question. How long can he play? Will he play past his first contract? Cardinals managed to, I think it was the Cardinals, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Cardinals grab him after grabbing Walter Nolan.
Yep.
Yeah, take two of the top players in this class from doing that and take a shot on him and absolutely love that pick. And then another guy that I think you and I both really liked was Siobhan Ravel. Yep. And then the Cowboys stopped his fall. He was 42nd on the consensus board and he fell to the third round. So loved both of those corners in the spots they went to as well. But just, I don't know the details on Siobhan, why he fell. But both of those guys,
injury.
I think
Again, it's injury.
Oh yeah, the injury. Yeah.
So I mean, he has injury issues as well. So a lot. That's kind of the story of these corners. I mean, Benjamin Morrison as well, probably a first round talent, and just falls because of again, injury issues. But the Will Johnson pick in particular, man, the upside with this pick, I mean, this is a dude that is a top 10 talent potentially in this
Yeah.
draft. Could be a lockdown corner, like a guy you put on an island, and that is worth. I mean, that's top 5 pick worthy, dude. If you can guarantee, which you can never, to be clear, but if you could guarantee he's a lockdown corner that you can just leave on an island, that's top 5, top 10 worthy. So getting him in the second round after already getting Walter Nolan, like, again, that's why I love so many of these drafts, man. I mean, the Cardinals might be one of my winners just for those top 2 picks. It's like
Yeah.
you got Walter Nolan, who is a first round talent, with Will Johnson in the second round. I mean, you could have just changed that defense with one draft, dude. Like, take a defense that was frankly really terrible. That was their weakness last year, man. Their offense actually started to cook, and their defense just wasn't good at all. They're really void of any elite talent, and they could have changed that in one draft. So I absolutely love the Will Johnson pick, and ultimately agree with you in general with the corners. I mean, a lot of teams got a lot of good corner value because the top prospects had question marks, but again, I would rather take a guy with question marks that has already had production. Like, he's already had production, and yeah, maybe he has character concerns or injury issues, but if he hits his eye end, then you could get a legit starting corner. So I just love all the corner value in the second and third round.
Completely agree. Loved all those guys. Another, I think one of the biggest by far steals in our eyes was Jack Sawyer. And he also probably falls into our next segment we'll end up doing, which is favorite pit kind of fits. Because he is a Steeler. Like that
Yep.
guy, it feels like one. But them grabbing him when they did, he went in fifth round, right? No, fourth. Fourth round, 21st pick of the fourth round. And he was on the consensus
Like in
board.
the 60s, I believe, or maybe
Yeah,
70s.
and fell all the way to the fourth round. Yeah, 67th, and fell
On the
all the way to the
consensus.
fourth
Wow.
round. So love that. Absolutely loved that pick for them and stopping his fall. Fantastic pick by the Steelers, and again drafting a guy that is a Steeler. And then speaking of the edges, there's a lot of the edge did fall. Some not quite as far as steal range, like a Donovan Ezraku who went kind of near the top of the second. But Mike Green is one we have to talk about. Mike Green, and it is off the field stuff. So that had nothing to do with him as a player, but he was 17th on the consensus. Ravens grab him, which the Ravens doing what they do, where they just draft good players. But they leave this with Malachi Starks and Mike Green, but they stop his fall towards the end of the second round. But the off field, he had some allegation stuff that happened to him back in early college days. Some teams interviewed with him, and like nothing was ever come of that. But it seemed like some people just didn't care for his kind of attitude towards that. But yeah, fantastic edge rusher.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. I mean, the off the field definitely hurt him in this process. Clearly, dude, I wouldn't have been surprised if the Panthers took him at 8th overall. So that just kind of speaks to, getting him at the end of the second round, adding him to the Ravens defense. I mean, that could be one of the draft picks we look back on. I think he honestly might be my biggest steal of the draft if I had to say one guy, just because like this guy has the talent to become an elite high level edge rusher, which really has been missing for the Ravens. They've kind of just had solid edge rushers over the last few years. They haven't had one guy who's just dominant, and Mike Green could really bring that to the table. And yeah, the off the field stuff, we really can't speak on it. We don't know any of the details and stuff. But that's obviously why he fell. Like, he was a first round talent, consensus top 20 player, that fell to the second round. So that's kind of the why behind his fall. One of the corners we didn't mention was Trey Amos. I thought Trey Amos at the end of the second was really good value for the Commanders. And yeah, I mean, Jack Sawyer, I have to speak on that one as well, because that's just, I mean, listen, he kind of reminds me of TJ Watt in a way, man. Like, TJ Watt, obviously a better athlete than Jack Sawyer, but not the most athletic edge rusher coming out. But what does TJ Watt do? In the biggest moments of games, he finds a way to make a play. He gets a sack, forces a fumble. That was Jack Sawyer in the playoffs last year, man. Like, that's how Jack Sawyer brought himself on the map. How many impactful plays did he make in the playoffs or in the Michigan game? Like all he was doing is making impactful plays at the most important time in the game. So that's why I'm not surprised at all. A team like the Steelers, like they might see that player on their team right now and like look how that worked out. So yeah, Jack Sawyer in the 4th round. I mean, I really don't get why the league was so low on him, man. Like I get the lack of athleticism, and you kind of need that to be a successful edge rusher at the next level. But this dude just finds a way to make a play. So I was kind of surprised that he fell so far. So yeah, that's definitely one of the bigger steals in the draft.
That play against Texas, that strip sack on Quinn Ewers that ran back was the difference in that game.
Yes.
Made a play when it mattered most. Another guy I wanted to touch on was Marcus Mbo, the interior offensive lineman from Purdue.
Huge
Giants
steal.
grabbed him. He was 65th on the consensus board, and the Giants grabbed him in the middle of the 5th round. Incredible value there for a guy that could have a path to starting
Yes.
relatively early there.
Correct. Yes. Hey, I love that pick as well, dude. Like when I was watching the draft at your house today, dude, and when he got picked, I'm like, he's still available. I just assumed that he went in the 3rd round because like he has the potential to go in and start immediately on that Giants offensive line that they're still rebuilding. And if you can get a starter in the 5th round, I mean, how many 5th round picks work out, dude? I mean, it is a very low hit rate. And if you can find a starter from that, and we're not guaranteeing he will be, but I'm just saying it's a real possibility that he could go in and start right now. So yeah, I mean, getting that in the 5th round is phenomenal. Just a couple other guys I would throw out as well. Darian Porter could end up being a pretty decent steal, man. Like he
Those
has a ton of
corners.
potential. Yeah, no, another corner, dude. The corner value was unbelievable. It really was. And then, dude, I mean, it's kind of hard not to mention, even though we've already talked about him, Shedeur Sanders. I mean, Shedeur Sanders could end up being the steal of this draft, man. And yes, there's question marks that we've already discussed, but he could end up being an absolute steal. If you find a franchise quarterback, really, if you find a franchise quarterback at all, it's a huge hit. But if you find one past round 1, I mean, it's just phenomenal, let alone round 5. So yeah, he has the potential to end up being the biggest steal in this draft. And I think either way, it's just great process. It's great process. And yeah, so that's another guy.
Yeah, one more. Absolutely. I mean, the quarterback position being so important, he will be considered a steal, without a doubt. And yeah, the cornerback value in this class, again, a lot of these guys thought would go at the top, and those injury concerns or whatever pushed them down. But it means that we kind of walk away with all of them thinking, "Wow, you got that guy there." Um, One other guy I would throw out too is Chris Paul Jr.,
Yep.
linebacker from Ole Miss. He was the 5th consensus linebacker in this class, 114th. He goes at 172. The Rams grabbed him in the late 5th round, so that's some really good value for him. So yeah, I mean, again, this was such an interesting in draft where, you know, there wasn't a ton of reaches, so there's still a good amount of steals, right? Like there's a lot of steals where it feels like these guys went later than we thought, but this class was so good that there's not many picks where you're thinking, "Wow, what a reach that just happened there." So very interesting class overall from that perspective. It seems like teams just took good players.
Exactly. I got to shout out also Jalen Royals in the 5th round, I
Oh
believe,
yeah,
or
yeah.
4th round, excuse me, 4th round at 133. It looks like. Actually, that could be even later. But anyway, point being is that at 133, getting Jalen Rolls, who was a 76, I believe, on the consensus. Yeah, I mean that's phenomenal value for the Chiefs. I mean the Chiefs have been a team recently that have found receivers in later rounds or non-first round wide receivers, and it's worked out well. They've had off the field issues, but it's worked out. They've been good players. So yeah, getting Jalen Rolls, adding him to that Chiefs offense, I absolutely love that as well. So I mean, there's just a lot of steals, man. Like you said, a theme from this draft for me as well is good teams. Like it stands out why they're good. They just trust the board and they take good players, whether it's a position of need or not. Like after the 1st round, I think position of need should just go out the window. I mean, that's just kind of
Yeah.
how, unless you have just like a desperate need that you like, and there's some teams that are like that. Like the Patriots attacked offensive line. Well, that's a desperate need. They had to get starters on the offensive line. Unless you're in a position like that, I don't think you should draft for need. I really don't, man. Like, you have to take good players because ultimately that's the most important draft strategy. It's just taking good players. So, and that was the theme.
Absolutely. And then to the wide receiver note, one other I'll throw out is the Alec Amanor picked by the
Yep.
Titans at
For your
136.
Titans.
I know he was 73rd on the consensus and goes like 60 picks later, and he has they traded up for him too, and with the whole Travis Hunter thing where he went for 290 something yards, 3 touchdowns in that game 2 years ago. Very interesting to keep them playing each other.
Yes,
So
it is.
love that.
It's
Love
a fun
that.
storyline.
All right, let's move on to favorite picks and fits, man. So let's, from a player perspective, some of the guys that went over the past couple days, what were some of your favorite picks where we kind of touched on them, some of these steals, right? Of like guys that went later. So you love the value of taking them where they went. But what are some of the favorite, picks and kind of fits from a player perspective that you saw?
One that stands out that we haven't talked about is Tate Rutledge in the second round for the
Oh,
Lions.
yeah.
I mean, he was one of the better players on the board, and you fill that last guard position that you need. I mean, the Lions' offensive line, you plug Tate Rutledge in, and now they have 5 elite to good starters. And like they continue to build the best offensive line in the NFL, competing with the Eagles, obviously, and targeting the trenches, which is what they do. So yeah, that's my first one that I'll throw out.
Completely agree. The dude, he's meant to be in Dan Campbell's team. He is meant to be a part of that team. Love that pick for them and a guy that can start pretty soon. I'm going to throw out 2, and we kind of run through as, you toss out yours too. But one of mine was Kyle Williams to the Patriots. Guy I would have loved to see the Titans take because his connection with Cam Ward back at Washington State. But I love them investing in a wide receiver like that because he may be the best separator in this class. And getting a guy like that for Drake May, it was a fantastic move. Get him somebody young like that can get open, help him out. And in the same round, the third round, I love the fit of Caleb Johnson with the Steelers. Love that fit. His uniform's basically not changing, going from Iowa to the Pittsburgh. So uniform's basically the same. But love that pick for them. Knew they were going to take a running back at some point, and he is RB1 now. They drafted him, and he is starting as of right now because they do not really have anybody else on the roster. They have Jaylen Warren still, I think, and then after letting Najee go. So love that pick for them and a guy that can start immediately and make an impact.
I like that as well. I'll throw out Donovan Ezraku. I should have thrown that out as a steal. I consider him a steal as well. But pairing him with Micah Parsons, man, like we talked about, if you look at our round 1 reaction, we talked about the Tyler Booker reach. But what the Cowboys did in a vacuum, dude, was phenomenal. If you flip the Donovan Ezraku and Tyler Booker picks, I would be like, okay, that makes sense. That does make sense. But they played the board. That's what they did. They could have had Donovan Ezraku as a better player, but they knew that, hey, these guards are going to go. Like the I wouldn't say elite offensive line prospects, but the top offensive line prospects in this draft went so early. So they played the board and they got a phenomenal edge rusher in round 2, which will fit right into the Cowboys. So yeah, and then did you mention Caleb Johnson to the Steelers? I love Caleb Johnson to the Steelers. Okay, yeah, that was one I loved as well. A lot of the running back fits are going to be interesting, dude. Like I said, the running back is one of the more interesting positions because so many teams got starters, man. So many teams got starters. So yeah, man, a lot of good fits, a lot of great picks throughout day 2 and 3.
I think a couple others I'll throw out. I loved the Darius Alexander pick by the Giants at the top of the third, kicking off the third round yesterday. That defensive line is disgusting now with Dexter Lawrence and Darius Alexander on the inside, Brian Burns on the edge, and now you had Kayvon Thibodeau still, but you also now add Abdul Carter to that. They have absolutely overhauled that defensive line. And then another pick. Savion Williams to the Packers. So they took Matthew Golden in the first, but I like this fit for them where you got a completely different skill set of a receiver here. Guy that's 6'4". He played weirdly almost like a running back at times. They would put him in the backfield and hand the ball off to him. So just a completely different skill set, and I love them taking a shot at 2 wide receivers. Some Packers fans, may think, may be fine with their receiving core, but they just don't have anybody that's a true X or really that above average, level. So I think taking a shot in the first 2 rounds to get Jordan Love some help was a solid choice by them.
I agree with that. I'll also throw out Omar Norman Lott for the Chiefs. Love that fit, man. Adding him to that defensive line, get to sit behind Chris Jones, learn from the great Chris Jones. And they bring, they're not comparable players, but they bring comparable skill sets. Even though Omar Norman Lott will not be a 3-down player, but he'll be a situational pass rusher and should make a big impact for the Chiefs right away. So I like that.
Yeah, one more I'll throw out. We should have mentioned him on the steal. I forgot about him, but is Braden Swinson.
Oh yes,
yeah. The Patriots grabbing him at 146, who will have an immediate path to start for them. So love that fit for them, getting an edge rusher like that late at LSU. Yeah, a lot of, again, since the theme of this draft was teams just draft a good player, not forcing too many things, right? Like taking what the board brings you. And because of that, it leads to a lot of good fits of guys that have paths to either get to start early on, like to your point with the running backs, kind of have to touch on Cam Scadaboo. I mean, the Giants taking him, that was, I think, everybody's favorite running back if you use the PFF mock draft sim this year at all. If you were for your team in the 4th round, you gave your team Cam Scadaboo. You just want that dude on your team.
Yep, no doubt, dude. I like the pick too. Listen, Scadaboo's a fun player, so I just love getting a guy like that in the later rounds. And again, a guy who could start. Like they have Tyrone Tracy, but I could definitely see Cam Scadaboo end up winning that job. It's also like, listen, I think we have to talk about intangibles a little bit. And Scadaboo brings the intangibles, man. He brings every intangible you can think of. So I really like that fit as well.
Absolutely, yeah. He'll make an impact in the Giants locker room pretty early. Any final thoughts on fits or player picks?
No, man. Lot of good fits and a lot of teams drafted well. That's what I gotta say.
Perfect. So speaking of the teams, let's jump into some of your favorites. So we got to dive into these a bit more in detail, and we'll do that. So just so you all know, we will go division by division. Each, all 4 teams starting this week. We'll start having those videos come out. So we will evaluate each class from each team. But at a high level, immediate reaction, what classes are standing out to you?
I've talked about them so much, man. I have to start with the Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns have my favorite draft, and you could pick it apart a little bit and say they didn't always focus on positional value, especially in the 2nd round. But what they did in the 1st round with their 2nd overall pick, they need to rebuild this roster. This roster is not where it was at a few years ago, and they still are held down by the Deshaun Watson contract. So getting the extra draft capital after giving up so much for Deshaun Watson, they didn't have a 1st-round pick for 3 seasons, man. Like 3 seasons, and now you just added an extra 1st-round pick from the Jaguars that could be a top 10 pick next year. That's a possibility. And you still get a blue chip player from this draft in Mason Graham, and then you add the 2 quarterbacks, which we've already touched on. I absolutely love that move. You add the 2 running backs, which, listen, DeSamp, it was a great value in the 4th round, in my opinion, and Quinshon Judkins, which will likely be their starter. And then they basically just added David Njoku 2.0 on the team and Harold Fanning Jr., man. Like, that's a perfect, plan for Njoku if he ever leaves the team. Like that's basically David Njoku that they just added right back to the team. So I just love the players they took, and I love the process, man. And they probably got the 2nd best linebacker in the draft in Carson Schlesinger, and I get it's a linebacker in round 2. It's not a positional value, but it's a starter, man. You get a starter and possibly a really good starter. So I just love the process from the Browns. And I think they had one of the best drafts, probably the best draft in my opinion.
Yeah, anytime you trade down, you're always going to favor for me in terms of your draft because, them picking up an extra 1st next year, you always have to evaluate that as part of the class, essentially. They'll start doing those like they just finished with the Bryce Young trade where you start comparing what was given, what you received from that. So moving back to 5 and picking up arguably one of the best players in the class, one of the only blue chip guys, doubling up at running back, doubling up at quarterback. building that offense up and then getting the second best linebacker was solid. One of the classes I really like is the Patriots. They have built their first 4 picks were all about build around Drake May. And I love that. That's what you've got to do when you have a young quarterback. You unfortunately can relate to that really well, whether with the offensive line, specifically with Andrew Luck, where it was neglected far too much, and so his health and his love of the game faded. But getting Will Campbell, taking Travion Henderson at the top of the second, Kyle Williams already touched on, loved that pick. They get Jared Wilson pretty late, to be honest, at the end of the 3rd round, center out of Georgia, who has a path to start pretty early on. And then I love the value of Joshua Farmer, the D tackle from Florida State in the 4th round, and then I already touched on Braden Swinson. And then just filling out with other picks. They did draft what appears to be a long snapper based on the position thing here, so that may ruin their class fully. But
and a kicker. They also drafted.
Yeah, they did. So if you ignore both of those picks, it's a really good class.
Listen, I wouldn't draft special teams guys. I just wouldn't. I feel those other ways. But I agree with you, man. They drafted in volume, and they didn't screw up the first pick. Like, yes, you could have went for the flashy Ashton Genty. You could have went for the interior pass rusher in Mason Graham. But you have to protect your franchise quarterback. Like, that's why the Patriots kind of put themselves in a position where they had to go for a position of need, and they got the best tackle in the class. So you have to be happy with that right off the bat. And then I get, like, to your point earlier, dude, I love the Kyle Williams pick as well. And they got another starting off, like Jared Wilson will start for them this year. I think that's a fact. He will be their starting center, or he'll move into guard, either one. And he'll be a starter on that offensive line. And if you can get a starter in the 3rd round, at the end of the 3rd round, I love that. Another draft that we touched on a little bit already that we have to shout out is the Cardinals. I mean, getting Walter Nolan and Will Johnson, I just absolutely love that. They also got Denzel Burke in the 5th round. Really love that as well. And then another team I have to touch on a little bit here is our division rivals, Dakota, the Houston Texans, man. I loved what the Texans did. One, they traded back in the 1st round when, it was that point of the draft where it's like, listen, the next 20 guys are like, okay, like, you can take any of these 20 guys. I'm like, yeah, that's a solid pick. Like, it's fine. Like, there's not a big difference in any of these guys. So they picked up 2 extra 3rd round picks from that Giants trade. And then what do? They start the 2nd round by taking Jaden Higgins. Pretty much was the last receiver available in the class that could be an X receiver at the next level. And they already have that Nico Collins, so they don't even have to have that skill set. But again, they're not drafting for need. And they just took a good player. And then they fill the tackle need in Ursary in the 2nd round. They trade up for him. I loved that pick. I mean, he could, again, start day 1 for them. And then they double up at the Iowa State wide receiver in Jalen Noel, another receiver that we both really liked. And yeah, man, I mean, I just love their strategy, especially in the day 2. I love their day 2 strategy a lot. So loved their draft.
Yeah, have to shout that out because we both loved both of the Iowa State guys, and they walk away with both of those receivers. And then Ursary. What's really interesting is every single pick they made involved a trade. Either they trading up or trading back. Like they were incredibly active on working their board, getting to where they wanted to be for their guys, and still made 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 picks in this draft. So incredibly active by that front office. I got to shout out the Steelers a little bit. I do love. They didn't make a ton of picks, but man, those first 3 of Derek Harmon, Caleb Johnson, Jack Sawyer, and then getting Will Howard, I do like the value where they got him at. But Derek Harmon is going to start. Caleb Johnson is going to start. And Jack Sawyer is going to have packages where he's in there to rush the passer. And he goes to a team that has Highsmith and has TJ Watt, where he doesn't have to be a 3-down player. You can put him in situational places and get value out of him that way. And then another class that I really like is the Seahawks. They quietly had a really good class. I like the Gray Zabel pick at 18. I know they don't like taking guards, and I usually don't like interior offensive linemen that high. But Gray Zabel is just a dude you want on your team. I mean, he played all three positions at the Senior Bowl and looked fantastic doing it. And then them trading up for Nick Emmanwori, a guy who started to get hyped to go in the first round, incredibly athletic safety. He feels like a Seahawk. He's the type of guy that looks and feels like a Seahawk. And also for Mike McDonald, can kind of mold him into that Kyle Hamilton role that he had in Baltimore. And then the value on Aurora, the tight end for Miami, was great. And then Jalen Milroe, we love that. And then the value on Torrey Horton, receiver from Colorado State, was great too. So they just had a ton of solid picks that I was a big fan of.
I agree. Damian Martinez in the 7th round as well. I mean, they drafted in volume and they took some athletic freaks, man. That was kind of like they filled the need in round 1, and then they just took a bunch of high upside guys throughout the rest of the draft, guys who can make huge impacts. So yeah, I absolutely love that draft as well. Another team that I'll shout out is the Tampa Bay Bucks, man. The Bucks had a phenomenal draft, in my opinion. You get Emeka Egbuka in round 1, which is one of the safer receiver prospects in this draft. I think his floor is just solid number 2 receiver in the NFL. Benjamin Morrison, we already touched on him a little bit in this show. Got a guy who has first-round talent, but injury concerns. So I just love taking a chance on a guy like that. And then Jacob Parrish, dude, in the 3rd round, you double up at corner. He's also super athletic guy that, you know, again, could fill a corner need for that team. David Walker in the 4th round, potential impactful edge rusher. And then Tez Johnson in the 7th, man. I mean, Tez Johnson, a guy who did not test very well, but was a super productive college wide receiver. He was extremely productive at Oregon and could make an impact on that team. And in the 7th round, dude, it's like, listen, I mean, you're playing with house money in the 7th round pretty much. If you hit in the 7th round, that's massive. So just love that. They didn't pick a lot, but I think they used the little amount of picks that they had very well.
Yeah, I completely agree. And yeah, Tez was 128 on the consensus board and goes in the 7th round. So incredible value there for him. And they attacked like some of the most impactful positions in the passing game. They drafted nothing but receivers, corners, and edge, 2 of each. So loading up there. And yeah, the value of Benjamin Morrison and Parrish were great. Loved that for them and David Walker. Another team, my last team I'll shout out because I think we could do this all night. We'll probably work our way into loving every draft. But one that I think has been sneaky good, to be honest, because with them being a team picking later, I'm sure we'll talk about the Eagles at some point because they always draft so well. They had some picks here or there I wasn't as big of a fan of, but the Chiefs.
Yes.
Chiefs let Josh Simmons fall into their lap, trade back, and pick up like a 5th that they didn't have. So they pick up a 5th, which they actually used on Jeffrey Bassa, the linebacker from Oregon, which was a solid pick. But then they get Omar Norman-Law, who you touched on, getting him in the 2nd round to kind of immediately start alongside Chris Jones on that defensive line that lost some guys this offseason and some depth. Ashton Gillette from Louisville, the edge. That guy has a path to play pretty early on as well.
He does.
Love the Noah Williams pick, corner from Cal. And then a guy that we both touched, you touched on earlier, we both love that super late was Jalen Royals. Love that pick for them, wide receiver from Utah State. So sneaky good class. I feel like it's been a little bit quiet, but they have been making some fantastic picks.
It's funny, dude, because I was going to touch on one more team as well, and I had the Chiefs draft pulled up. So they're definitely one of my favorite drafts as well. So, yeah, and again, dude, like one of my themes to start the show was there's a lot of teams with a lot of good drafts, man. Like, we don't hate, like, pretty much any of these drafts. The last team, since Dakota took my last team, is the Cowboys. I touched on them earlier. Tyler Booker, Donovan Ezaraku, and Ravel in the 3rd round. You got 3 first-round talents, Cowboys. And they didn't force the running back pick, right? They didn't force the running back pick, which I love. But then they pick up Jaden Blue in the 5th round. Listen, Jaden Blue can become a starting NFL running back, and I would much rather use my higher picks on more impactful positions, like, Donovan Ezaraku. Now, again, they took a guard at 12, but again, they played the board, and man, they got some great players as well. So love the Cowboys draft.
Yeah, I agree with that. Leaving night 1, we were like, Jerry's going to do it again. He's going to have another class where we're looking at it like, what were you thinking, man? But at the end of the day, they did get the best guard, consensus best guard in the class. may have been a bit higher than we wanted. But yeah, to your point, they get the first three guys. If you just interchange when they took them, then it's like, wow, they absolutely nailed this. But they still walk away with all three of them. And then yeah, Blue has a chance to be a playmaker early on for them. So definitely agree with that. Love what the Cowboys ended up doing there. So yeah, that kind of wraps up our immediate kind of reactions to day 2 and 3 of the draft. It was fun. We watched every single pick. It was a lot. A lot of guys. Can't wait to see them start getting into camp and see how things play out. But as I mentioned a bit ago, we will start releasing videos this week, going division by division. I think we're going to start with the AFC North and NFC North. I think we're going to start in the North and try to do a couple of those to kick things off and go team by team. So look out for those coming out this week. But yeah, and then as always, like, subscribe, hit that little bell thing, share with your friends. We appreciate anything you all do to help support us, and for everybody that tuned in live tonight. So appreciate it, everybody. We'll see you the next time.
All right, until next time, thanks for talking ball with us.